In this video, we will discuss something called man pages, and that's just a built-in documentation system for Linux. This goes back to the 1970s when Unix was first being developed. And when you got Unix, it came with documentation. And that documentation was several binders of information about various commands and configuration files, programming functions, all the pieces that make up a Unix system. And collectively, that set of binders was called the manual, and an individual entry about a specific command was called a manual page, or a man page for short. And even if it was several pages in the manual, it was still called a man page. That was just sort of the nomenclature that was used. Well, this manual was also supplied in electronic form, so you could just have it on the system and be able to reference. And the command to look at that documentation is called man, and let's take a look at some man pages. First, let's take a look at the man page for the pwd command. It's a fairly simple command. We type pwd, we find out what directory we're in. And this shows a few things about the basics of a man page. The first section is always name, and it gives us the name of the command and a very brief description. Print the name of the current or working directory. We see that the synopsis always tells us exactly how to use the command. We have pwd in square brackets means it's optional. We don't have to say it, but we can supply some options. Then in the description section, we have some description of those options. Use pwd from the environment even if it contains symlinks. Avoid all symlinks. Show some help. Show the version. There's not a whole lot here. None of that really matters to us. Another thing to note, you see we have the manual page, pwd, line 1, press H for help or Q to quit. We're actually running the less command. And what really happens is you get dropped into what is set as your default command to handle things that are longer than one screen. Less happens to be the default in Linux. Who wrote it? Some bugs. Usually a man page is going to end with the see also section that we see down here, which is other things that are like it that also might apply. We're in less, so we hit Q to get out. So let's take a look at a little more complex page. Do one for the uptime command. Tell how long the system has been running. That's the function of uptime. The description's a little longer this time. It's not showing us a bunch of options, but it is telling us basically what the format is, what it is we're looking at when we look at the output of uptime. It's a one-line display. It gives you the current time, how long the system's been running, how many users are logged on, and the load averages for the 1, 5, and 15 minutes. Then they even have an explanation of what the load average is. So you can read that, get a more technical feel for what the load average is. Options. In the previous man page, options were just lumped into the description. Often it's a separate section. We have a -p, show uptime in pretty format. We have a help. We have a since, so when did the system boot up? And a version, display some version information. Files, often if there's files that a program either depends on or uses or affects, that'll be listed there. Again, authors and the cs command or the c also says, hey, if you're interested in uptime, you might also be interested in taking a look at the ps command, the top command. The 1 in parentheses is the section of the manual. It harkens back to the time when it was a physical manual. So commands were in section 1 of the manual. System calls are in section 2. C function calls are in section 3, so on, various sections. utemp, section 5 is documenting file formats or files. So the utmp file, which it reads to see all of its information about who's logged in. That's a page you might be interested in. The W command is a command that gives you a brief summary of what various users are doing on the system. But now we're looking at this and we say, hey, this P, what does the pretty format of uptime? We've done uptime before. Here's the format of uptime. It's just as described. It gives us the time, tells us how long the system's been up, how many users there are, and what the load averages are. So what's the pretty version? Well, let's try that out. Uptime minus P for pretty. It just takes that time and formats it as a more human readable. Not necessarily prettier, but it is more human readable. The nice thing about man pages is they're readily available. They all have a similar format. They're all going to follow that same structure. One-liner description of the command, a very, very terse synopsis of how to use the command, then a description of the command, documentation of all the options of the command. Sometimes there's examples on how to use the command, and then near the end there's going to be that see also section. So it's a predictable format. You know where to find things. If you know how to use a command, that synopsis can be very helpful to know whether there's required arguments, what are the optional arguments, that kind of thing. Just as a general thing for using man pages, because they're designed as a documentation format, what I tend to find helpful if I'm trying to learn about something new, like we did with the uptime. You read the man page, you see something in it that looks like it might be useful, go ahead and try that. Exit out of the man page, try that thing, maybe go back to the man page and reread again and develop your understanding. And you can even kind of iterate on that. You can learn Linux from man pages is what it boils down to. And back in the day, that's pretty much how I learned Unix, was from man pages. Let's do another example. Let's do this one with the man page for the kill command. So we do man kill. It says kill sends a signal to a process. We discussed that when we talked about kill. Kill doesn't kill processes, it sends them a message, it sends them a signal. We see the synopsis, we have options, we have one or more process IDs to effect. That's what the dots mean. And then in the description, it tells us the default signal is the terminate signal. Hey, you need to terminate. That's what the default action of kill is. Use minus lowercase l or minus uppercase L to list available signals. That sounds kind of interesting. And then they even tell us particularly useful signals include hup, int, kill, stop, and cont. And what all those signals mean is beyond the scope of what we're going to do here. So I can list out the signals. And I have a dash lowercase l or dash dash list. Sometimes commands have what they call a long form and a short form. So dash l for the short form, or dash dash list. The two dashes tell us this is a long form. It's not the arguments L, I, S, and T all combined. Give us a list of signal names. This option has an optional argument which will convert a particular number to a name or the other way around. So that's kind of handy. If I know the default signal is term, because it told me that, what number is that? Or if I have a number, what thing is that? Dash capital L, list all the signal names in a nice table. We're going to try that here in just a second. And then, like I said before, we have some examples. So here's some examples of kill in various usages, and those can be very helpful. List of other commands you might be interested in using, and bug reports and things like that. So let's try the kill minus capital L to get our list of signal names. Wait a minute. The man page says that kill minus capital L should give us a list. And kill minus lowercase l can translate things. Okay, so there's a big list. That sounds more like the capital L description. We can look through here. We can see, I happen to know, 15 is sig term. That's the default signal. So what was going on with this capital L? If we go back to the man page, it clearly says that capital L lists signal names in a nice table. Yet when we tried it, it said invalid signal specification. The answer to that is actually a little bit subtle, and it's worth pointing this out because this can happen. If I say type kill, type tells me when I run kill, what am I actually running? What's the path to the thing? Or in our case, is it built in? Kill is built in to the bash shell. We're not running the kill that man page is for because bash has its own version of kill. We're actually running the bash version of kill when we are typing kill like this. So if we say /bin/kill, which is the path to kill, now if we say dash lowercase l, we get a list of signals. And if we say bin kill minus capital L, we get the output that sounded like what the man page described. So that's a little tricky sometimes if you happen to be using something that could be built in or could be a command on the system, just something to keep in mind. Now, to really overwhelm you with a man page, since we found out that kill is a built-in, let's take a look at the bash man page. Now this thing is long. I'm just going to scroll through it here, just so you can get a feel for how long this man page is. This is everything about bash that you might need to know. We've actually made it to the point I was looking for. This is where it documents all the commands that are built into the shell. So if we go down here, we see the cd command that we use to get around directories. That's not an external command, that's actually built into the shell. Go here a little bit further, we're going to see another one that we have used. FG we used with our background processes, that's built into the command. All the backgrounding and stuff, that happens in the shell. There's jobs, same thing. Oh, and here's kill. So here's the description of kill as a shell built-in. That's the one we're running when we don't say do anything. You see it has optional arguments. We can do dash s a signal. We can do dash n a signal number. We can just say dash signal. We can do one or more PIDs or job specifications. Or we can say kill minus lowercase l and give some specifications of what to kill. And then a description. Send the signal named to the processes named, essentially what the kill command does. Send a signal to the process. And minus L lists the signal names. There's no mention of a minus capital L. That's why we got an error when we tried that with the kill command. Man pages are incredibly helpful. They can be a bit daunting, like that bash man page. They can show you everything about a command. If we look at PS, they don't even bother to list all the options that PS has. They just say, yeah, there's lots of options, because there are. And this is another one. Here's options for PS, and they're just going and going and going. Well, obviously, when you read that man page, you're not going to understand all those options. You're not going to be able to take it all in. It's just too much. But maybe you can take in one thing, try it, read it again, take in another thing, try it, read it again, and you can just do that iterative process. Just keep them in mind. Man pages are incredibly helpful and a very useful thing to get used to using.